Hello students, I hope this finds you doing well since our last class. I wanted to do a short video on descriptive essays to kind of help you out on the first essay that'll be coming up. As you know, it can be descriptive or narrative, but this video focuses on descriptive. So if you look at your screen, you've got descriptive essay outline. As you know, every essay consists of an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. Of course, the introduction introduces what you're going to talk about to the reader, and the conclusion pulls it all together. So if you look at what's on your screen, this outline for a descriptive essay has this organized into paragraphs, and this outline is very explicit. If you look at the first part, it says open topic sentence, attention getter. That could be anything from, it's called a hook. So if you've never heard that expression, the attention getter is actually the hook in your writing. And you can start out with a memory, a catchy phrase, something funny. It can be a descriptor that's outlandish so that you get the attention of the reader so that they'll go on and read your essay. So if you look, it says opening topic, the place I'm writing about. If you're writing about a place, if you're writing about a person and you want to make an outline to help you organize your writing, then that would say person. Even a thing. Some people write about things. So if you go on down, brief feeling about the place and the sensory details. If you recall, descriptive essays, the sensory details are touch. So you touch the table, it's smooth, it has a certain texture. You smell it. If you've ever walked into a city dump, which unfortunately I've had the pleasure of, then you know if I describe something as smelling like the city dump, you're going to recognize that if you've ever been, or associate it with some sort of trash and understand what I mean. So you've got touch, you've got smell, you've got taste. So when you taste something sweet, if I say it was sweet, you have some idea of that. If you hear something, when you hear sounds of cars or you hear something around you, some other sound like insects outside while you're camping, that's another sensory detail. So taste, touch, smell, sight. Sight, I mean, you see things every day. You could describe something's red, something's blue, it's bright, it's dim. So those are the type of sensory details that you can add into a story, and those make the essay descriptive. In other words, you're describing a whole scene, you're describing a person in detail, or you're describing a thing in detail so that someone can truly picture. So if you recall, we did an exercise in class where you had a picture in front of you, and you all did quite well on that. So that's the reason I believe you can do really great on this assignment. And during those, you imagined you were there or something to do with the photograph. Maybe if you had the one about rockets, you were actually in a rocket ship that went off to space, or you talked about something that happened. But you all had sensory details in that. So keep that in mind, that you want the 5 senses to be present in your descriptive essay. And one of the excerpts from your book that I think is great, it's a great example. It has a lot of details. The essay is by MacDonald. And depending on which version of the book you have, you may have to look for it. But I'm going to read you a little excerpt from his essay in our book. And it's Cherokee Paul MacDonald, A View from the Bridge. And you can look in your the front of your book to find which page it is on the electronic version, or if you ordered the printed version and it's a different edition, you can look it up. So if you go down, if you do want to read along in your book, if you go down to the very first page where the story starts, the second paragraph, he already starts describing someone. It says, he was a lumpy little guy with baggy shorts, a faded t-shirt, and heavy sweat socks falling down over old sneakers. So you kind of have a picture of this guy. It's a great descriptive sentence. The essay that you write doesn't have to have sensory detail in every single part of it, obviously, because you have to weave your story together. But you just put little pieces of this so that your story comes alive. It's very descriptive. If you go on down a couple more paragraphs, you see some dialogue. So he says, hey, mister, would you help me, please? And then right under that, the author gives you another sensory detail. The shrill voice penetrated my jogger's... Sorry about that. So the shrill voice penetrated my jogger's concentration, and I was determined to ignore it. But for some reason, I stopped. So he gives you the shrill voice. If you've ever heard anything that you think's high-pitched or shrill, it's not pleasant to the ears. You can imagine what he's talking about, and that is a sensory detail. There are all kinds of sensory details, and each of us describes people in our head every day, like we talked about. Here's another example from this. I watched as the kid dropped the baited hook down into the canal. Then I turned to start back down the bridge. So after he describes this bridge, he goes on. That's when the kid let out, "Hey, hey," and the prettiest tarpon I'd ever seen came 6 feet out of the water, twisting and turning as he fell through the air. So there are a lot of sensory details in this one. And if you want a great example for writing, it's a wonderful essay, not just to read, but to sort of study this descriptive type writing. Now, if you look in your book also, in one of the editions, it's on page 81, but it's in the description in an essay analysis, and it talks about the stages of writing this essay, and I think it's figure point 3.1. So if you have a look at that, it says development diagram, writing a description essay. And the first thing you'll want to do when you're actually developing the long essay is you'll want to do a little bit of pre-writing. You'll want to choose what your subject's going to be about, like I mentioned at the beginning of this. So you can write about a person, an animal, a place, a thing, even an idea. You can write about ideas. So decide what your purpose is going to be. Are you going to inform someone? Do you want to evoke emotion, such as a memory that you're sharing and describing? So decide how much detail that your audience needs and apply questioning to the 5 senses. So then you start adding in these pieces of sensory details into your story. Identifying what we called the other night dominant impression. That's an overall idea about how you make someone feel or what you're trying to get across to your reader. It's not necessarily as specific as a thesis of another type of essay. And always support your thesis with evidence or your dominant impression with evidence. And in the way that that's done in a descriptive essay, of course, is by sensory details. So if you didn't understand what the diagram was telling you, that's really what it means. Organizing the evidence, you want it to be done in a way that people understand. So it can be chronological, and that means in some sort of order. So you really want to make it organized so that the reader understands where you're going with it. So if it's just an overall memory, it's good to go in some sort of sequence like beginning to end, or if you're doing a flashback and so on. If you go on down, write the first draft. So the first draft is not always what you end up with, right? The first draft I think of as sort of that brainstorming part. So if you like to do outlines, you can use the one that you see on the screen. There's a lot of useful information inside of your book that you can use, but I wanted to show you something that wasn't in your book that might be helpful, the way that someone else might organize a outline to get them started writing as a form of that preparation for writing, the pre-writing. And then, of course, you're going to revise your essay to make sure it's okay, and we're actually going to do peer review for that, and we'll also review your essay and help you out also. So I hope that this was somewhat helpful. Please feel free to email me any questions that you might have, and I'm more than happy to help. I realize that sometimes hybrids are a little more difficult, but we'll get through it together, and I'll make a few more videos about other information until I see you next time. Have a great day.